In 1970, a Mexican journalist covering a weird World Cup where the ball bounces slightly too predictably for me coined a phrase. With the reigning world champions, the world's best team, and the sport's most overachieving underdog all in one group, this particular scribe wrote the words, Grupo de la Meute, and a century of cliches were born. And so, as rugby prepares for its fiercest ever World Cup, a certain Tartan army finds themselves in a very similar situation to that round ball Czechoslovakia team from 53 years ago. Scotland currently stand as the 5th best team in the world, their best ever world ranking, and they're headed into a World Cup in their strongest ever position. Over the last year, they've been rugby's most overachieving underdog, coming off their best Six Nations ever with back-to-back wins at Twickenham, a rare thrashing of bogey team Wales, maybe the toughest championship test France have faced in Paris since they lost to Scotland 2 years ago, and a decent autumn decided on extremely tight margins. And yet, Scotland find themselves in a pool with the reigning world champions and the world's best team, and also Ireland as well as Romania. So, how have Scotland built to this point? Do they have it in them to beat the Springboks and or Ireland, which is exactly what we're going to do if they're going to escape the group, which is the second time since 2007. The core of rugby union as a sport, the absolute most basic principle, well, maybe second after classism, is the notion of attack versus defence. Two units trying to outwit and outmuscle each other. The balance of power and eventual result decided by which team can get the balance right between those two and overcome the opposite from the opposition. And whilst there's plenty more subplots to come, perhaps the absolute core of how Scotland will get on in France 2023 comes down to that bottom line principle of attack versus defence. Because South Africa and Ireland boast maybe 2 of the 3 best defences on the planet right now. We're talking Phoenix Rifle jetpack, watertight D that's built to repel. And yet, whilst over the last few years, Steve Tandy has installed a steal in Scotland, in 2023 Six Nations, they very much reverted back to the old Toonie archetype. Defence be damned, let's play some goddamn ball. Scotland's attack is one of the strongest out there, and it begins with their kicking game. It's all built around the boot of King of the Flash Cunts, Finn Russell. He's usually talked about as a maverick baller, but over the last few years, he's become arguably the best tactical kicking fly half in the world. Now, people will be balking at that because the phrase tactical kicking is usually used to refer to one specific tactic, being trading possession for territory, but Russell's game goes way beyond that most basic equation and into a career-spanning, match-defining quadratic that's come to define how Scotland play and open up their attack. Finn Russell is more unpredictable than Ethan Hunt reading the lottery numbers and has a bigger box of tricks than a clown with a TARDIS, and this means a defence has to watch for literally everything. Every single option is in play while Finn Russell has the ball in his hands. Look at his performance against France this Six Nations just gone. His sheer range of attacking kicks left the French backfield totally unprepared for what he'll do next, and began to open up so much space as they were left behind the line and not able to cover the wide channels. Yet Russell is so aware of his surroundings as well. Here his eyes are solely on French winger de Mortier, calling for the ball and dropping it on the toe the moment he advances to hit a beautiful 50-22. However, because he's a maverick on par for a different Tom Cruise character, that's right, Vincent from The Colour of Money, literally the only predictor of Russell's future behaviour in any given scenario is, in a lesson coaches who keep picking Thomas Lavanini should probably learn, past behaviour. This against England in 2022 is vintage Finn. With Scotland on the front foot, he hangs a cross kick, prompting England to concentrate resources on stopping Scottish operations down that end on that wing, the English winger from the far side then slotting into fullback while Stewart goes to join the defensive effort. So Russell immediately goes for a second back-to-back cross kick, an insane baller move that exploits the fact a hooker has had to fill in on the wing because the wing is slid into fullback. Cowan-Dickie punches the ball forward, the referee don't like it, and it gifts Scotland the penalty try that decides the game. Fast forward 1 year, and Warren Gatland's Wales, a team who've always been huge on video analysis, find themselves in a very similar situation. As Hugh Jones makes his break, left wing Rio Dyer, the quickest player in the Welsh team, has raced across to try and make the tackle. Him and Williams get Jones to ground around the 22, but Scotland recycle quick enough that Wales are still setting. Russell notices, as such with Dyer at the bottom of the ruck, its only prop, Wyn Jones, covering the touchline. Jones does ultimately a frankly pretty unbelievable job for a loose head to eat up stay in space, meaning from Russell's kick he has to tap it infield to captain Jamie Ritchie, and Hawkins makes another great tackle, but Scotland are on the 5 metre line with enormous momentum, huge space, and Wales enormously disaligned. However, because he did it a year ago, the prospect of back-to-back cross kicks has been drilled into Wales, and winger Josh Adams has hung on the right touchline out of shot here for the kick. Russell then spots this and calls his bluff. Seeing Williams has flown up flat, he lobs it over his head for Jones here to ideally run onto, and in perfect world, Jones can arc outwards, Hogg is on his shoulder to fix Adams, and even if the second Williams here does make it across, Scotland have the numbers to score in the corner. However, this is ultimately shut down by an unbelievable moment of defence from Josh Adams, who holds his width, meaning Hogg can't drift outside him, forcing him and Jones to hit the same space, so Hogg takes the ball instead of Jones, who can't, hit that outside line, and then he makes a sublime chop tackle on Hogg to halt all Scottish momentum. Scotland found a plan B instantly, it's so close to working, and we kind of see what's required to shut down the Scottish attack here. 3 elements. Research, you have to be able to predict the predictable through their past behaviour. 2, unbelievable defensive talent to shut down plan B. And 3, ultimately, an element of luck. Because there's another side to it. Scotland won't be playing Wales in the World Cup. Well, no. Scotland will only be playing Wales in the World Cup if both of them make it to the semi-finals. And we all know that Chile and Uruguay are destined to meet in that game. So we need to ask another question. How would this particular attack work against the Springboks? Because the answer is, this would probably work against the Springboks. Nienaber's defensive system would handle this completely differently to Wales, where Williams, acting as the 13, shoots up and the winger waits wide until they have to work in. If this is South Africa, Am here concedes the ground and drifts to shut off Russell's passing options instead of stopping and committing here, not looking to put any pressure on him, but rather just mark all the options, stay connected. As the winger, let's say it's Colby for the sake of argument, starts high in order to shoot out a line and apply pressure, a bit like Creel in this similar example against England, where they're able to easily get outside him because he's shot up so aggressively. South Africa's defence is better than Wales's. I have no doubt they would not have conceded as many tries as Cymru if they were put in all the situations Wales were over the course of this match, but there are odd examples you can thumb through from Scotland's Six Nations from all their games where they're pulling moves that would work sublimely against the Springbok defence, especially because I skipped one key element at the start of this attack, and that is what led to that break by Mr. Hubert Jones. Possibly because they had to find another way to understand each other with such disparate accents, over the Six Nations, the midfield trio of Russell and Glasgow's patented Hugh Pilotu combo, Hugh Jones and Sione Tuipulotu, developed an almost telepathic understanding. Now, this is a lovely, cool, great, wonderful thing anytime, but importantly, it allowed them to pioneer a legitimately kind of genius starter play that I'm going to call the Hugh Pilotu shape. So, what is the Hugh Pilotu shape? Well, notebooks out everyone. Let's start with an example. Against Wales here, Scotland go for the drive from the line out, the maul then collapses, and as White passes the ball from 9, Russell is lined up as first receiver. However, last second, whilst the ball is in the air after it's left White's hands, Russell slides out from first receiver to second, the ball instead going into the hands of Tuipulotu working inwards. This completely changes the defensive picture for Wales. Suddenly it's a ball carrier, not a distributor, and they visibly slow their line speed to prepare for the crash. Hugh Jones commits hard to his line. This is kind of his key element. He's always running a line off someone thereabouts, and nudges Hawkins to isolate North a touch. He's not connected to his inside man anymore, as Finn, having moved out of 10, slips into the boot of Tuipulotu, that's the space behind this ball carrier. He takes Tuipulotu's pass and throws an absolute perler of his own to Kinghorn across the face of Dyer, who recovers superbly to make a try-saving tackle on Kyle Steyn, who is really, really close to finishing this in the corner. This shape allows Scotland to completely change what the opposition are defending, but also artificially create situations and buy time for Russell to thrive. As we see here later in the game, Russell is at 10 and looking for the ball until it leaves White's hands, where he slots into Tuipulotu's boot. This grants Russell so much more time than taking the ball at 10 would have given him. Having seen this in the first half, Cuthbert shoots up to try and shut down the wide passing lanes, allowing Russell to instead dink it over his head, putting a lovely kick straight to Van der Merwe, Doohan then rounding Williams. Whilst Cuthbert can get back and make a great tackle, he just pops it inside to Herb Lincoln, who runs it in for a superb score. And its use can be so much simpler too. It doesn't need to require Russell doing fancy shit. Something pool opponents, Ireland, know very, very well. This is early in their Six Nations clash back in March. A lovely touch by Russell gets Doohan through the defence, and whilst Murray can wrestle him to ground, Scotland keep the pace up to an insane degree as Russell just slots back into position, begins to organise a shape, call a few things. And after a few phases, Scotland are on the ascendancy and the Irish pack are really sucked in to defend around the ruck. Meaning, crucially, it's just the Irish backs lined up out here. So, Russell calls the Hugh Pilotu shape first, and then the ball out second. Ireland are initially numbered up, but Finn drifts off, allowing the ball to go to Tuipulotu instead and floods into his boot. With Russell headed in behind, Archie realises he's now marking nobody. He's of no value to this attack, so tries to get every Irish defender to shift over one. He physically pushes Ringrose, except Keenan here has all eyes on Russell. He's seen where he's going, he's seen him slip into the boot, and he's fully expecting him to get it out the back, as seen in those examples against Wales, especially with Hogg and Co out wide. So, Keenan fires up, meaning Ringrose, who is trying to adjust thanks to Archie's call, has to try and drift from marking Tuipulotu to marking Jones without Keenan there to jam in with him, meaning when Sione pops it to a centre partner on a beautiful short ball line, Ringrose is left trying to cover two players at once, allowing Jones to just dissect the Irish defence by baffling them with Finn's simple slide. The shape is pretty simple. Russell and Tuipulotu slide to one on the other's boot, and Jones just hits a hard line off them. It's this kind of triangle effect that causes enormous chaos because it's almost impossible to read because they have so many variations of where the ball could go. Because it doesn't always have to be a showcase of what Russell can do, with Tuipulotu being such a capable ball player in his own right. Indeed, if we rewind to that example against Wales that kickstarted it all, Russell once again floats last second off the ball into the boot. However, with North shooting up on Finn, Tuipulotu picks a trick he learned from his 10 and goes full eyes out the back, blind dropping the ball off to Jones, picking another impossible angle to split the Welsh defence and race into the 22. All thanks to that kind of dummy with the eyes that Finn loves to throw himself. Or here, against Ireland, White's floaty pass allows England so much time to get up in Scotland's face, but that's to their benefit. With Russell heading into the space behind, England fire up, figuring it's either the Tongan descended centre doing a crash-up job, because that's what Tongan descended centres do, or Russell's going to do some tricky shit out the back once the pass comes to him. Hogg starts on the left wing, holding Malin's in place, and Duan's outside line is superb. It's really, really good and holds the defence. However, because they're watching Finn and Duan, understandably the two of the most dangerous players in Europe, nobody is considering the exact thing that happens, which is Tuipulotu is more than just a big lad. He drops it on the toe. It's a lovely weighted kick that sits up perfectly for Hugh Jones to regather and score the opening try. It's just a beautiful bit of subverting the expected playbook and adding extra dimensions through just what this shape can create. It was responsible for so much of Scotland's best attacking rugby this Six Nations, and I genuinely think we've only seen the start of it. I think we're both going to see other teams start to adopt this, and Scotland start to iterate so much more over this summer, as he did over the Six Nations. Once teams started to pick up on it and analyse Finn, they had so many more options they could pull from. Here, they begin in the Tuipulotu shape, but last second, Tuipulotu overruns the ball deliberately, allowing Russell to take it at 10 after all. Now expecting a fancier play, France start to look wide as the equivalent flat ball is no longer on. They're not looking for the ball that Tuipulotu throws to Jones against Ireland, except it very much is on. Finn throws an almost impossibly flat pass to Jones, positioned perfectly between two French defenders, who slices France through, massive open, bam, to score, thanks to Scotland inverting their best attacking weapon from that year's championship. Or here, simpler still, Wales see them set into a similar shape and prepare themselves for this attack, setting incredibly narrow, Dyer in tight so they can flood resources onto where Russell starts. They want Dyer to defend in the same way the Springboks want their winger to defend, so that they can cover where Russell starts, where Russell ends up, where both centres are going to go, and Hogg or Duhan running on the outside line. Except once the ball comes out, seeing Wales have gone so far out of the way to accommodate for what Scotland are going to do, Russell just drops it on the toe and Kyle Steyn takes the cross kick and scores in the corner. Imagine the possibilities for chaos if Scotland can take this up again and start involving other players from outside the midfield trio, potentially bringing Duhan van der Merwe right through the middle, because this shape caused Ireland serious problems. Whilst best deployed as a big attacking plot, Scotland would also use it to simply try and net Tuipulotu better carries, as the defence was watching for a second thing as well with Russell at the back, rather than just readying their shoulder for Sydney's proudest Scottish Tongan. Yet, whilst they did cause them problems in attack, that game against Ireland in March also represents maybe Scotland's most frustrating, biggest missed opportunity of the last couple of years. Because for as much as their attack functioned, the basics just blew up in their face, despite an Irish side where everything that could go wrong was going wrong. Of particular issue was the line-out, which just snapped. It was atrocious. In this rather charming edition of Rugby World magazine, guest edited by someone who I hear is incredibly attractive, coach John Dowsiel gives the impression that he's still haunted by the line-out issues Scotland went through in that game, unable to secure their own ball or crack Ireland's code, even without them having a registered hooker to throw in. It's clear he's since been doing a hell of a lot of work on Ireland's line-out in an effort to make sure this never happens again, and speaks of what a target area the line-out is for Scotland, especially with their key callers Grant Gilchrist and Scott Cummins due back ahead of the tournament. Cummins is a superb player who's not talked about enough, but Gilchrist also flies under the radar often because he's very unflashy, but he is one of the best line-out callers in the game. He almost always uses himself as a dummy option. He rarely calls line-outs to himself, especially on the critical line-outs on either goal line, and tends to pick options with trick plays and backline manoeuvres in mind. He selects his line-out call based on the wider context of the game. On almost every occasion we saw the Tuipulotu shape called by Russell during the Six Nations, we saw Gilchrist opting for an 8-man line-out rather than Scotland going for their usual 5+1, because it's the option that creates the most space beyond the 15-metre mark. Scotland's goal with the Tuipulotu shape is to confuse the centres by giving them one more option than they can handle, and hence it works best when 10, 12, 13 are working together as a unit, preferably in that order. Typically, this means on the try line where all forward are either looking for a pick and go, or off first phase where the full pack are otherwise engaged, in a scrum, or, thanks to the 8-man lineouts, a maul. Scotland's attack is a living, breathing organism. The line-out feeds the backs moves, which feeds the kicking, which feeds the line-outs moves, and the backs moves. It's an interlinked setup, and all it took was Ireland dismantling the line-out for everything else to fall apart to a disproportionate degree in the Six Nations. However, as I think all Irish fans can probably attest to, that game was a lot more tense than the eventual scoreboard suggested, and you wonder if Dalziel can do a strong job, as he promised, on sorting out the line-out coming up. Perhaps Scotland can give them a bit more of a game in the fixture coming up, with everything beginning to interlink. Because possibly the best Scotland side of the professional era now finds themselves faced with the toughest test of maybe any Scottish side ever, the reigning champions and the world number one, and that's just to escape the pool. Scotland are absolutely capable of beating both. They're a good enough team. Their kicking game is world class, their defence really sound, and attack one of the most dynamic in the game at the minute. Where Ireland's defence could broadly be shut down if you memorise all 860 pages of their playbook, and South Africa can be minimalised at least if you front up enough physically, Scotland's attack is more based on raw, unpredictable skill, and I don't think there's any team in this World Cup more capable of creating tries from situations where they're going backwards, yet in a group like that, you wonder whether they'll desperately need that because they might be about to spend a lot of their time in reverse gear. And on top of this, they're going to need to do all of this without Stuart Hogg, the talismanic fullback who defined Scottish rugby for a generation, a once-in-a-lifetime talent who dared 1,000 of his Scotch contemporaries to dream beyond their own talent levels and beyond what they'd seen Scotland achieve on TV when they were kids. Horb Klingflair is a very capable replacement. There's even an argument he was the best performer during the Six Nations, but headed into a World Cup where the odds are so heavily stacked against them, I'm not sure there's a single personality in the modern history of the Scottish game you'd be more reassured by having on your side than Stuart Hogg, the man who raised the standard single-handedly of this team forever. The Tartan army now heads to France in a very similar situation to Czechoslovakia 53 years ago, hoping they can emulate that proud underdog's incredible performances of having their worst World Cup win ever and not winning a single game and losing to Romania. Oh, shit. Okay, well, for Scotland, the task is clear, the odds are obvious, and the job is simple. Make sure the French translation of that phrase the scribe wrote so many years ago doesn't end up of le groupe de merde. Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. That was Scotland. There are videos on 10 of the other teams around the channel, and the other 9 will be coming very soon in the near future. Including next week, we're going to aim to get through all the Pacific Island teams in Pacific Island Week next week. That is
Fiji.
That is
Samoa.
That is
Australia? Wait, no, that's the other one. Wales.
Tonga.
Tonga, that's the one.
We will try and get through them. They'll be next week. It's ongoing. We're close to the World Cup. We're just over 4 weeks away. It's all getting very, very soon. And there will be rugby coming up constantly before the rugby. So I hope you all have a very, very lovely rugby.
I was just doing my job out there, so making other boys look good.